everyone, this is a winter image I took, one of my favorites. It's actually along the shoreline of Lake Superior near our home, um, and it's one of the Great Lakes. It's a massive lake, and it's very cold. It's as cold as it looks, um, but the sky was really beautiful this day, and sometimes it's kind of hard to find inspiration in the winter, especially if it's not really snowing or anything like that. And so it's definitely something that I try to seek as much as possible, as long as it's not absolutely too cold, because it can get really cold here to the point where we can't be outside for very long. So obviously my horizon is really crooked in this image, and that's the first thing I'm going to fix. I either fix this by using the marquee tool, or I go down here, and one of my favorite tools to use in Lightroom is the transform area, and I select either auto, full, or vertical usually, and sometimes I do, I straighten my images and straighten my lines manually, but I'm going to hit auto and see if that fixes it for me, and it does. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm going to select my marquee tool to see kind of where he's falling in my frame, and I really like where he's falling. So I'm not going to crop this in anymore, not going to do anything like that. I like that he's falling on the rule of thirds here. I think that it's a pleasing composition. So the next thing I'm going to do is work on my sky. I did slightly underexpose this for a couple reasons. And you can see that he's kind of underexposed. One of the reasons is I slightly underexpose with snow anyway, because it's white and it reflects more light than he does. So I try not to blow my highlights in my snow. And you can see that I have it here just looking at my histogram. And then also I wanted to maintain some of the details in my sky. By the way, this image, or this editing video, is going to be strictly just in Lightroom. So I'm going to take a graduated filter, and I'm going to take it from the top and drag it all the way down. Pretty far, actually. Okay, so like that. And then I'm going to select exposure. I'm going to bring down my exposure. I am going to add contrast. I am going to increase my shadows by bringing the slider down, increase my blacks, bump up my clarity quite a bit, and also dehaze my sky a little bit. This brings out some of the detail in my sky. You gotta be careful, you don't want to do too much because it starts to look crazy. So just do it a little bit there. And just kind of play with this some. And I feel like I'm seeing a little bit of noise, which happens when, especially when you increase clarity and dehaze. So I might bump up and remove some of my noise here in my sky. I might bring down the exposure just a little bit more. So just kind of play with this by hand. Okay. So now that I've done that, it's also, obviously I drag this way farther down. And you know, one more thing I'm going to do is actually manipulate the color a little bit with the excuse me, sliders here. I feel like I'm seeing a little bit of magenta in my sky, and I prefer not to, so I'm going to actually add a little bit of green. Might increase the blues a little bit too. To kind of play off the complementary colors of the gold and the blue. Okay, so now I'm going to hit O on my keyboard. This shows me where my edits were applied, okay? And some of them have fallen on him, and I don't want that. So again, I'm going to select brush, erase, nice big brush. I'm going to brush it off of him. And I might lower the flow here a little bit. Okay, so that's pretty good. Hit O again. There we go. Okay, so now you can see, if I do this here, you can see all that happened to my sky. It's quite a big difference. I like it. another thing I'm going to do actually, and I normally don't do this, but with snow I typically do, is I go down here into the lens corrections and I select to remove chromatic aberration, but I also select to enable profile corrections and remove the vignette that was added because I shot this with a prime lens. Normally I like the vignette that an 85 and a 135 lens give. This was taken with my 85. So normally I don't remove that, but when I'm shooting in fog or I'm shooting in snow, I do, because you can really see that vignette because the snow is white, fog is white, and I just don't care for that. It's fine. I like to keep it, like if I have like greenery and foliage and all of that, that's fine. But you can really see that vignette, you know, in like a snow situation. So I'm going to remove that. Okay, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to select contrast and bump up my contrast quite a bit here, the snow. I'm going to bump up my vibrance, maybe to like plus 10. So contrast is at plus 25, vibrance is at plus 10. I am going to next go into the luminance area, and I am going to really bump up orange a little bit. Hopefully bump up some of the highlights in his coat. Same with yellow. You can kind of see what that did. And I encourage you to, if you really want to see what something does, just really bump it all the way up. Might bring the yellow down a little bit. Might bring up the orange still a little bit more. And that brought it up too much. It's changing my snow too a little bit, which I don't want. And saturation, so I bumped up the orange and yellow luminance quite a bit. And then I'm going to go into saturation here, and I'm going to bump up yellow. I'm going to go into hue, and I'm going to actually move my orange slider closer to yellow. Not too much, maybe to like plus 5. And I like where this is going. I am going to also, per usual, in the details area, do luminance noise reduction to 20, color to 50, and sharpening to 30, which I always do. Okay, so I'm going to use a brush now to kind of work on some of this. I'm going to lower the highlights on the snow a little bit more. It's especially like right here. It's kind of bugging me. One of the things you could do is, just because it's quicker, is just use a radial filter. I feel like it's brighter right here by him. So I'm going to go in here. Gosh, my computer is working kind of slow. Might be a little bit too full. And I'm going to just lower the highlights in this area specifically. So again, I'm going to hit O to see where it's being applied. I'm going to bring down the highlights here. Hit O again. There we go. Okay. And you can see the difference there. It's a very slight difference that made, but it did make a difference. And I might bring down the feathering a little bit too. Okay, so I've done that. And then I'm going to go in here and really make him pop more. So I'm going to take a brush tool, and I'm going to select, you know, to increase my highlights, increase my whites, increase my clarity. His coat's really dirty. That's something that I might also try to clean up too. I might bring up my exposure too a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to hit O again to see where I'm applying these edits. Okay, there we go. And so I'm just brushing this on his coat. Making sure not to get any of the snow. Okay, so then I'm gonna hit O again so I can see what's happening here to this coat. And I'm gonna continue to bump up my whites a little bit more. Clarity. Maybe even bump up the temperature a little bit, make this a little bit more yellow. Contrast. And if I do this, I can kind of see the changes I made for the jacket. Again, my computer is just crazy slow right now. I don't know what's going on. It's normally not like this. So I'm going to zoom out, and you could already see the difference that was made here just with his jacket and the sky. I might make him pop even a little bit more. So I am going to increase the exposure on him a little bit more. And then what I might do is bring the overall exposure in my image down a little bit to make this a little bit more dramatic. I do like to intentionally underexpose my images. And then, again, maybe bring him up a little bit more. So it's just a lot of like tweaking. I'm bumping clarity, sharpness, exposure, contrast on him quite a bit. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. I'm going to also, because I like to, when looking at this image, the front of his coat is actually brighter than the back of his coat, so I feel like more light is coming from this way. It actually, I believe the sun was over in this direction anyway, even though it's behind the clouds. So I'm going to take a graduated filter and I'm going to darken just one edge of my frame, just to add a little bit more directional light to this image. So I've placed this here. And then I'm going to just lower the exposure. Nothing too dramatic. I think a little bit goes a long way. But I might do a little bit more. But I like what that did there. And I feel like it just gave it a little bit more directional light. I might also do that from the bottom here too. Again, so I'm just like applying, instead of doing a vignette, because I don't want to have all edges of my frame dark, because it's just not realistic either. Usually the sun or the light is coming from one side of your frame. So I don't like to have a vignette in all four edges. I'm going to bump down the exposure down here at the bottom too. Just a little bit. So maybe like 10, like -10 there. Okay, so I think that looks good. Okay, so this is all just done, like I said, in Lightroom. Let me duplicate this. And so you can see here, this is the before. And this is the after. All done in Lightroom. And that's it. I just made him pop a little bit more and enhance the sky. And just use some of the tools strictly in Lightroom to do all of this. So one of the other things I may do just to kind of make additional colors pop real quick is I might go in with my brush here. I also like this gold grass that's peeking through just because it kind of matches his coat. So I might take like a brush and then increase the saturation here on this, just being careful not to really hit too much of the snow, but kind of make some of this grass pop a little bit more, because I do like how it matches the color of his jacket. There's like a repetition of color going on within the frame. So just applying this to the grass, giving it a little bit more color pop here because I try to do whatever I can to find color, and in winter there's not much of it, and to make that pop. So I hope that this editing video helped. Let me know if you have any questions.